Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am on my way home from work. I had an early day, and I'm going live just so I don't have to upload the video later. Usually I wait for people to get in here, but I'm just going to get started right now. That way people that watch this later won't have to wait around for me to get started. So I've been having some thoughts about the poem and trying to take into consideration some of the stuff that Forrest has said. You know, his whole, when somebody asked, if I gave somebody a map of the Rocky Mountains and your poem and told them to meet me where warm waters halt, would they be able to find me? And Forrest said something along the lines of, like, there are many warm waters in the Rocky Mountains, and nearly all of them north of Santa Fe. Try to look at the big picture. But before he said that, he said, you oversimplify the clues. But then he's also accused other people of complicating the clues, if you will. So he says, do not mess with my poem. Don't overcook my poem, don't oversimplify my poem, but he's also said that you have to have a good grasp of geography, and also there's one more thing I was going to say. You have to have a good grasp on geography, not to oversimplify, but not to overcook, not to mess with it, and most importantly is that a child might have a better chance of solving the poem or finding the treasure, whatever. Don't ask me to elaborate on that. So he's saying a child might have a better chance, but don't ask him to elaborate. And I got to thinking about a part in the book where he talks about he's pretty much giving his dad props for, it was after he sold a painting and his dad said, you made more money in 15 minutes than it took me to pay off my house or whatever. So he starts talking about his dad and about how he was an educator and he was very proud of it, and he almost felt selfish because all he has done is looked out for himself. So I tried thinking, I'm like, okay, well, why would a child have a better chance of solving it? What's a way of, finding the answer without oversimplifying or overcomplicating? And why so much mention of his dad being a teacher? And then, he emphasizes the importance of words, that we don't really know what words mean. It got me thinking, what if the poem is almost educational in nature? And I always find myself trying to explain one of my new ideas, and it comes across like really hard to explain because it sounds just like what we already know. Stuff that, like, yeah, the first clue is begin at where warm waters halt. Yeah, I got it. And you could come up with a variation of that, but it'll always sound the same. And that's the issue that I'm having. If you look back at a couple of my other videos where I'm like getting frustrated, I'm like, I hope this makes sense, because everything that I'm saying, it sounds exactly the same as what has been said before, but it's playing out differently in my head, if that makes sense. But either way, so I'm gonna move on with this. So his dad was an educator. Whoever solves the poem will have studied it, analyzed it, and moved with confidence. They have to have a good grasp of geography, and maybe there's a possibility that a child might have a better chance at solving it. So what if the first stanza is not actually talking about him? And what I mean by that, and I don't even know why I'm making this video, because I don't know, I feel like I feel like this might be a right idea to have. But the first stanza, you know, as I have gone alone in there and with my treasures bold, I can keep my secret where and hint of riches new and old. What if that's not talking about him, but it's actually talking about an event, or not an event, but a process? And I've talked about processes before in my other videos. And what I mean by that is, okay, so Forrest said, you know, somebody asked if the clues existed when he was a child, and he said the clues did not exist when I was a child, obviously because he hadn't thought about the poem yet, but most of the places that the clues referred to did. Now, he's saying most of the places, all right, so that means that something had changed since he was a child. Now, Forrest also said that he believed, or that there could be a chance that the treasure isn't solved, or that the treasure isn't found for 1,000 years. Now, knowing how old some of these legends are, you know, like the treasure legend of Montezuma and whatnot, you know, you have to ask yourself the question of, well, if the treasure is found 1,000 years from now, is it because somebody stumbled upon it, which Forrest says isn't going to happen, or is it because people are still analyzing and working on the poem, you know, just like we research other treasure legends? And I promise I'm getting somewhere with this. So if most of the places that the clues refer to did exist, that means one or more of them did not exist, but they still have to be something that won't change over the next 100 years, but probably will change over the course of, or by the next millennia. Now, are we to believe that Forrest has used a man-made marker of some sort? And I don't believe so. I don't believe so, because that stuff, he had an envelope full of $500 and $1,000 bills, and he took those out of the chest because he thought that they might, you know, decompose or whatever. Then he also had a banknote, if you will, an IOU for $100,000 in his treasure chest, so the finder could go redeem it at the bank. But he decided to get rid of that because he wasn't sure if his bank would be around in 1,000 years. So why would it be safe for us to think that one of the clues is man-made? So I believe it all to be natural, right? And it might be natural in the form of, you know, terrain features and whatnot, and it might be natural in the sense of like a historical aspect. So if you get on Wikipedia and if you type in geography and you look at what the definition or what Wikipedia says is geography, pretty much it's a world-renowned discipline of, you know, physical features, human interaction, environment, earth sciences. Like, it's all encompassing: historical, environmental, economical, geological, hydrological, literally everything. Now it really makes you wonder, Forrest said no specialized knowledge is needed. Well, if you look at what geography really is, it is very in-depth. That is definitely specialized information. But what if it's not? What if it's something simple that a child learns while in geography? While in geography class. So when a child reads it, you know, as I have gone alone in there and with my treasures bold, I can keep my secret where and hint of riches new and old. And then we begin, right? Begin it where warm waters halt and take it in the canyon down. But what if it's not begin it? Okay, hold on. I'm going to jump to a different sentence. Okay, and I think it'll make it seem like it's more sense. I'm pretty sure the first time reading the poem, the first quite a few times reading the poem, we looked at it and we were like, this is nonsense. Like, this poem doesn't even make any sense, right? And there was a reason for that. And I'm going to explain it right now. So the line in the poem, so hear me all and listen good. Now, if you were to tell your teacher, so hear me all and listen good, or if you were to write that in an essay, so hear me all and listen good, what do you think would get circled in a red pen with a correction word written next to it? It's almost like asking your teacher, can I go to the bathroom? And she's like, may you go to the bathroom? Right? So when I hear, or when I look at, so hear me all and listen good, I think of, or I have recently started thinking of, or tried correcting it into, so hear me all and listen well. Which is why I'm getting to the whole child thing. Maybe a child will have a better chance of solving the poem, because maybe the child is seeing the improper sentence structure, which is why Forrest says it's not associated with any structure. That doesn't mean a building, right? There's sentence structure, there's literary structure. So what if he's saying that his poem isn't following any structure, but it's supposed to, right? So what if instead of begin it where warm waters halt, what if it's supposed to be it begins where warm waters halt? Meaning, so the first stanza is talking about something. As I have gone alone in there and with my treasures bold, I can keep my secret where and hint of riches new and old. It's talking about something that was created, okay? And then it goes into further elaboration, okay? It begins where warm waters halt and takes it in the canyon down. So something begins where warm waters halt and takes it in the canyon down. So it's almost like we're talking about a process that had happened since Forrest was born, since most of the places the clues referred to did exist, but meaning some didn't. So I'm thinking that there was some sort of terrain changing event that had sculpted the land and turned an area into something to marvel, something to stare intently at, if that makes sense. So it's almost like, if this is true, that would mean that the first stanza is not talking about Forrest going into his hiding place, but it's actually talking about a singular event where something by itself was created. Gosh, I hope that makes sense. So like, let's talk about warm waters for a second, okay? So if we have warm waters, right, and then they halt, does that mean that they stop? Does that mean that they slow down? Or does that mean that they drain or they recede? Okay, so if a lake were to form a canyon, what happens is, and this is like a creationalism argument used by creationists about, you know, the Grand Canyon and stuff like that, that it actually didn't take millions of years to carve itself, but it happened very, very rapidly and not very long ago. Pretty much saying that there was a lake. There was like a lower lake, and then there was an upper lake. Okay, and between the current and the waves and whatever, or just the moving water, it had breached one part of the lake. So you have a puddle, okay, and there's a couple really interesting videos about this on YouTube too. Like a guy did it with his 2 kids, and like he had to go grab his kid and pull him back because the canyon just started carving. It was nuts. The lake overfills, right, and it begins spilling, right, but that spilling is causing current on the beach, right, and it's eroding it. Eventually it gets to the point where the ground breaches and the waters just start pouring out of the canyon, or start pouring out of the lake. So this happened in the upper lake, right, and they were pouring into the lower lake. That started spilling over, and then that wall breached, and now you have 2 lakes worth of water just rushing, just blasting its way through the very, very soft sandstone and limestone that was left behind by the Western Interior Seaway. And that's something that can happen. Like if you look up articles of canyons that pop up like overnight, just Google canyons created overnight or something like that. I don't know, get creative with it. But it's a process that can happen very, very quickly. So Forrest wanted his treasure to be searched for 1,000 years. So obviously he would have picked structures that would last 1,000 years, not being man-made, but being natural. But he's assuming that they're going to change over the next millennia. Well, why would they change? Well, due to erosion. We're specifically talking about waters, and we're talking about canyons. A river changes course, right? And depending on, droughts and floods and, so on and so forth, dams that were put in, dams that were taken out, all that stuff changes. Now, I'm assuming that the location that's talked about, it hasn't changed much over the course of the last couple of years, meaning that it has carved through the sandstone and it has finally found its way to like the more harder stones, but so it hasn't changed much over the last century or so, but it's only a matter of time before it does. So we have to think of stuff that is gonna be around for forever. Well, one thing that's always going to be around for forever is history, right? Events that have occurred throughout history, unless they become forgotten. It's only a matter of time before stuff becomes forgotten. But the major events, that's the stuff that becomes really hard to be forgotten about. And maybe that's why Forrest says, he has a feeling that it would change over the... All right, sorry about that. My app stopped. But he mentions how Shakespeare talks about how everybody becomes forgotten, right? It's only a matter of time. Now, Forrest also, discusses that of himself. What do I do to not become forgotten? How to leave my mark on history? Well, you can leave your mark on history, but eventually it will be forgotten, right? We look at, I'm sure when the Egyptians built the pyramids, they were amazing freaking feats, right? People like marveled them and admired them and everything else. But over the course of time, history lost track of how it was done. So history can change, and it's told throughout, whoever the figure is and so on and so forth. So history can change, but it's less susceptible than a man-made feature, right? And then we have, geological features, rocks and hills and mountains and rivers and so on. Like a river or a stream, it can meander, but for it to like actually legitimately change its course and just take a new path completely, that's a pretty long process. So that's something that's less susceptible to change and will take a long time to do. So we're looking at historical events, and we're looking at geological creations, if you will. So I'm going to say that it's safe to assume that not a single clue in the poem is man-made. It's not the blaze. It's not the home of Brown. It is events that have transpired and this little snowball effect of stuff, along with the area that is around it. So when we talk about geography is the study and discipline of physical features along with its human interaction. So we're talking about historical events, and we're talking about geographical locations. And those are the two things that are going to be very hard to change, because it's chronicled, it's archived. There's a story of it all, telling it all. I mean, look at the Bible. It's talking about, stuff that happened thousands and thousands of years ago. I'm going live with no Wi-Fi from my phone. So And that's why I think maybe a child will have a better chance at solving it, you know, through stuff that they learned in history class, through stuff that they learned in geography class, through stuff that they learned in earth sciences, and lastly, from stuff that they learned in English and grammar class. So they read it, you know, as I have gone alone in there and with my treasures bold, I can keep my secret where and hint of riches new and old. Sure, they might think it's a person until they start reading the next thing. Begin it where warm waters halt and take it in the canyon down, not far but too far to walk, period. They're like, that doesn't make any freaking sense. And then they get to thinking, like, okay, well, what's a single event that happened, created something, had something to do with riches, and happened within this last century. And then they get rid of the whole begin it, and they start thinking of it begins. It begins where warm waters halt and takes it in the canyon down. The it in this case is something. So it's not a matter of what warm waters is, but more along the lines of what it is that warm waters is creating. I hope that makes sense. So, you know, like the Western Interior Seaway, right? It covered the entire area of the Rocky Mountains. Okay, and the, you know, the ocean or the seaway receded, and it would come back, and it would recede, and it would come back, and every time it would form somewhere different and kind of occupy a different patch, but generally it was all the same. You know, from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up to the Arctic Ocean was just this gigantic inland seaway running from south to north. And then one day, the fault lines hit, and the mountains just started uplifting, right? It didn't happen like rapidly, you know, it'd be an inch, or, you know, it'd start happening slowly and slowly, and then next thing you know, we had the mountains. But that's one example of where warm waters halt, right? Where the seaway had receded, right? And along with that, while the mountains were coming up and the water was receding, you have lots of new current being introduced, and waterways being carving canyons. You know, the same for lakes, right? We have lakes, and the area surrounding the lake, the lake fills up, it starts spilling over nearest low ground, and then while it's spilling over, it starts carving while it's flowing outward. So, and then once that canyon carves down deep enough, next thing you know, there's no more lake, there's only a basin. There's a basin on a high ground, or let's call it a depression. There's a depression on the high ground that's forming a canyon in the low ground. So I really think that begin it where warm waters halt. I think that the first stanza is not talking about forest. It's talking about something, right? A singular something, right? That has gone alone in there, alone in the Rocky Mountains or whatever. And with it, either carried or produced or resurfaced treasures. And that area is not well known to people, which is why it's a secret, or people might know about it, but people might know of the area, but not sure about how it came to be. And it all began when warm waters halted and took it in the canyon down. Gosh, I hope that makes, because it sounds like I'm just saying the same thing that we've always said, but it's different in my head. But in other words, I don't think that warm waters halt is a hot spring. One, because it's hot. He doesn't say hot. He says warm. Okay, there's only two places to go from warm. That's hot and that's cold. So I don't think it's a hot spring. I don't think it's where a hot spring runs into a hot water runs into, cold water, and right there it's warm. I don't think that's the case. And I think that's why he says, look at the big picture. The big picture is that at one point in time, the waterways were different. And at one point in time, the entire freaking thing was a waterway. And as the uplift started happening, the rivers started forming, and they started carving and everything else. And they began flowing, downward or southward, with the exception of a couple rivers that, are flowing north or whatever. But I guess what I'm essentially trying to say is I'm pretty sure the poem, while looking at the big picture, is talking about the geography and the physical geography and its human interaction and its history of the Western United States, more particularly the Rocky Mountains. And it's going to be a matter of moving away from begin at where warm water's halt and take it in the canyon down. It's going to be lining up the rest of the poems, or the rest of the clues, to figure out what that event is talking about of a specific area. Let me say that differently. We have to look at the rest of the clues in order to figure out what event is happening. We have to look at the rest of the clues to determine the event. That's the way to say it. Look at the rest of the clues to determine the event. Then once we determine the event, we will be able to line it up with where warm waters halt and take it in the canyon down. And everything after that was human interaction, human history. No place for the meek. The end is drawing nigh. Paddle up your creek. Heavy loads, water high. It's all explaining in detail, just in a very cryptic detail, something that happened in a specific area. I feel like that's the best way to say it. But yeah, I just pulled into my driveway. Let me look at this chat real quick, see if anybody said anything towards me. Thank you guys for stopping by the way. Gigi, is it Gigi or Gigi? I'm not sure if I've ever seen you in here before. I like the fact I'm seeing new people in my chats every time, so I appreciate that. Can you share anything about your possible team up with Sean Dotson? Where did this come from? I'm not team up. I haven't even seen any videos from Sean in a while. My daughter said straight away when it's ice. I've thought about that too when warm water's halt, but warm water doesn't just freeze. It has to cool down first, and then temperatures have to drop. I don't know. I've thought about that too, but a definition of warm waters is an ocean, sea, or large body of water, excluding the Arctic or Antarctic regions. So, one example would be when those oceans or seaways that existed during the last ice age, that would be what I would consider like warm waters halt. When certain seaways outside of those regions, but within the Western United States, when they froze and became glaciers. I don't think everything is off the table, but man-made markers blazes are dangerous, as doesn't connect. I don't think anything's man-made. I drive with pants on. Okay, let me see what else there is. It's a new army thing. Pants off for America. I don't know about that. He says a child has a better chance because a young person has considerably less preconceived ideas. Absolutely. And they only know what they have been indoctrinated to know in school. And that's what I'm saying. I think that's why he throws all these clues in about how his dad was an educator, and, you know, his dad spent a lifetime educating children. Meanwhile, he was just looking out for his own selfish self, trying to make a buck, and so on and so forth. A kid has not experienced the outside world yet, and they know the facts that were presented to them in school. The kids have a good imagination. Okay, so with imagination is more important than knowledge. So us, the parents, the adults, the whatever, we have the knowledge, but not the imagination. I can't even play pretend anymore. I don't know how to play pretend anymore. And a kid kind of has both, but if you were to take one side or the other, I would say that they have a heck of a lot more imagination than they do knowledge. So maybe Forrest is telling us that for the adults, you need to set your knowledge aside and imagine what it was like to be a kid, or the way that you thought when you were a kid, in order to find the treasure. There wasn't... Hopefully the lag wasn't too bad. My app turned off just real quick, and then I just resumed it. I do not think the treasure has anything to do with San Lazaro Pueblo. Isn't that south of where Forrest lives? Fact. It is fact, yes. I don't know what that's referring to. I looked up the backward bicycle. My first thing was like, oh, I could do that. But I've seen all those people, so maybe I couldn't have. There's that other guy, what's his name? Kyle Sando or whatever. He thinks it's at San Lazaro Pueblo too. And I don't know, sometimes the stuff that the guy says, I'm like, damn, you know, he pulls out some stuff. Like, I feel like if he were to set his wrong solve aside and dedicate all that attention to detail towards a correct solve, I feel like he would stand a pretty damn good chance of finding it. But instead, he sticks to San Lazaro Pueblo. He bashes Forrest and everything else, and even his viewers. He's like, how do you guys not see this, blah blah blah. So he's bashing Forrest, he's bashing his viewers, then he disables comments. It's like, bro, keep your fucking comments up and let people comment on your stuff. I don't know, I've wanted to say a couple things to him, but he always disables the comments. I don't know, I'm not saying any solve is incorrect, I just personally don't believe it's in San Lazaro Pueblo. When I get the treasure chest, I'm going straight to Elon and negotiating to take it to Mars. Good luck with that. Alright, I'm trying to see if anything else. It sounds fine, Rodney. We all got to think about this and take a view on it. I don't know. I feel like we've all been reading it as directions instead of descriptions. Descriptions of something in the past. I know a lot of people have been looking up stuff in the past, but they're kind of, you know, freaking it's just scattered. You know, they'll see something, it'll have some sort of ring to it. They'll start pursuing that rabbit hole. I did the same thing, but it really didn't have anything to do with the remainder of the clues. So I think we need to really look at the clues and find the event that matches perfectly, and then, you know, while we're realizing that, then it will become obvious where warm water's halt and take it in the canyon down. And Forrest, he said something kind of to that effect. I mean, I guess it might be reaching, but he said, you won't know where warm water's halt until you have the chest in hand. But, so he's implying that obviously you have to have the treasure. But he also said that you'll have to move with confidence. So how can you move with confidence to the treasure chest if you didn't solve all the clues. So to me, I'm thinking that you have to find the blaze, and once you find the blaze, where warm waters halt is going to become all too obvious, but obviously it's still a guess, so you won't know for sure until you go to the chest. Now, when I say find the blaze first, I'm not saying try to locate the blaze first, because Forrest already said that that's not going to happen. You're going to have to follow the historical events and timeline, if you will, and events that transpired in what area in order to be able to find the blaze. But I think once you do find the blaze, then it will click with you, it'll connect with where warm waters halt, and you will be able to move with confidence. You're like, that's it, I'm going to this place, this is perfect. But you'll still probably have a little bit of doubt until you secure the treasure chest, and that's the point in time when you will know, like, my warm waters halt was correct. Okay, let me see if there's anything else. Yeah, I didn't think San Lazaro was north of Santa Fe either, Steve Rempel. So that's out of the question. I don't think Forrest lied to us about, 8.25 miles north of well, he didn't say that. That's just what it has been converted to. But it wasn't a wrong decipher, because Forrest has ended up saying it. The first time he said it in links. I think it was like 66,000 links or whatever that had been converted into 8.25 miles. Forrest didn't disagree with it, and then ever since then he has said himself at least 8.25 miles. So we know it's not taken out of context. Yeah, I really want to know more about this partnership with Sean Dotson. I'm hoping that it's going to come in. Is that a baby seat in the back? Is there? I have two. Well, she's not a baby anymore. She's still in the car seat. I have a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. Oh, alright, I have to hop off. I'm getting a phone call right now. So, hope you guys enjoyed. I'd like to hear about the Sean Dotson thing. Alright, take it easy.